Why are you, a total stranger, insisting on spending so much time in our home? I heard my sister-in-law chastise me in a furious tone. I kept living with my in-laws after losing my dear spouse. Was it forbidden for me to be there? I had no idea you were the type of lady you are. Take off as quickly as you can. Even my normally kind mother-in-law started silently criticizing me. I would go my own way if that was the case. I wanted to scream these things in my heart, but I held myself back. I recognize. I said, my name is Gina, and I'm 40 years old, while swearing to exact retribution. I am a teacher in an elementary school. At the time, my spouse James, who teaches elementary education at a separate institution, was 40 years old. For 12 years, we were wed. We got to know one another in the first elementary school I worked at after college. James, a dependable senior colleague who was 2 years my older, taught me a lot about life in school. We were drawn to one another at work and finally tied the knot. Since I like spending time with kids, I decided to become a teacher. Sadly, though, we never had kids. Before we were married, my father-in-law passed away in his 50s, and James lived with his mother until I came into the family. My mother-in-law was well off because of the real estate and other possessions she received from my father-in-law. But ever since we were married, we had made the decision to give my in-laws $2,000 per month. Our goal was to make our dream come true. We had to save for it, but out of obligation, we sent money to my in-laws on a monthly basis for food, electricity, and a tiny amount of rent. As we carried on with our teaching duties, our concern about the rising number of students missing school grew. Our goal was to create a school where kids like this could learn in comfort. Mary, James' elder sister, is 3 years his senior and resides in a different state. My sister-in-law's kid should be with her alone now since he went for school in the spring. Despite being around an hour's drive away, my sister-in-law made weekend visits and asked my mother-in-law for financial assistance. The tuition for my son is cheap. Can you lend a hand a bit? Monetary assistance. The tuition for my son is cheap. Can you lend a hand a bit? Really? My sister-in-law would inquire gently. It is unavoidable. What quantity do you require? For whatever reason, my mother-in-law would spoil my sister-in-law. James was baffled as to why. He eventually questioned his sister. Sis, you received a fair amount from Dad's inheritance, one day. Frustrated. Why do you never have enough money? With incredulity, he inquired. Then my sister-in-law struck back. You wouldn't understand because you don't have any children. The cost of raising children is really high. You mention inheritance, but financial stability is a finite resource. But even I had to admit that my sister-in-law's spending was obviously out of control. She had previously requested for money for food, then for house repairs, and then for schooling. My mother-in-law would always give my sister-in-law a sizable sum. I was baffled as to why. We went as normal to our various schools that day. A typical morning with the typical surroundings. Up till that call from a phone. James had fallen, and I was informed that he was sent to the hospital immediately. I was shocked to hear that I was being urged to rush there. My spouse passed out. I was confused, but when I got to the hospital, James wasn't breathing and needed a lot of testing. I hoped it was all in my head. But James did not survive that night's rigorous therapy. I took quick leave from work to plan the funeral, so I didn't even have time to mourn when faced with this unexpected occurrence. Otherwise, I felt that I could not survive psychologically. Throughout the funeral, my mother-in-law, who was probably more devastated than I was, politely greeted the mourners. It was a chance to reunite with my sister-in-law's family. Robert, the husband of my sister-in-law's, and their college student son Alex provided significant assistance. But my sister-in-law didn't appear to be mourning the loss of her own brother. She appeared to be almost thrilled about it. Following Jane's burial, I went back to my mother-in-law's residence. The family of my sister-in-law claimed they had to go home since they had other things to accomplish. My mother-in-law then said something gently. Gina, I never imagined that losing my baby would make me feel so alone. When I heard these words, my suppressed grief released, causing me to cry uncontrollably. Would you like to live in this house forever, Gina, if that's all right? Living alone makes me lonely. My mother-in-law addressed me with kindness. Mother, Let's help one another out from now on, I answered, blotting my tears. But then there were additional issues. Not too long after we made the decision to move in together, my mother-in-law passed away. It might have been brought on by her son's death. A stroke was identified as her ailment. She was lucky to live, although her right side was paralyzed. With the assistance of a cane, my mother-in-law desired to stay in her home. This house is filled with so many memories. I wish to stay here for a while. She spoke a little slurred, but determinedly, as she stated that. My mother-in-law assured me, "Don't worry, Gina. I'm fine. Keep working hard." But I was concerned about leaving my mother-in-law at home alone herself, as she is partially disabled. We made the decision to employ a helper and long-term care insurance for in-home care. I still sent my mother-in-law $2,000 a month even after James passed away. But my sister-in-law began going to see her mother more often. My sister-in-law stated, "I'm just worried about Mom, but is this really understandable?" I had learned from the past not to take my sister-in-law's remarks at face value. After becoming immobile and experiencing weakness, my mother-in-law said, "Gina, is Mary interested in living here with us? How do you feel?" Mary want to. And her spouse, what about him? Surprised, I asked. Alex is away from home, already attending college. She argues that living here by herself is okay. Her spouse may ultimately relocate here as well. Mom-in-law gave an explanation. I questioned openly, uncomfortable as I felt. "Do you think it's good?" "Well, I won't object. What about me?" "Gina, what are you saying?" "To me, you resemble a daughter. My mother-in-law told me it was okay for you to be here. I wouldn't be able to stop my sister-in-law the way James was able to if she really moved into the house." I still felt unresolved uneasiness after this. With these worries in mind, I had to leave the house for a week-long training program, entrusting the assistants with taking care of my mother-in-law. I tried to seem casual to allay my mother-in-law's fears, saying, "Mother, please follow the helper's instructions as I'll be away for a week from tomorrow. If Mary shows up, don't give her money, and get in touch with her husband if something appears strange. My sister-in-law may stop by the house while she was gone, and that frightened me a lot. This concern prevented me from focusing on my workout. After a week, I arrived home to be met by my sister-in-law. "Mom wants to chat to you, so welcome back." With a smug smirk, my sister-in-law turned to face mate sensed something sinister. My sister-in-law walked into the living room and gave me a smug smile. I sensed something sinister. My mother-in-law came into the living room and gave me a disgruntled look. I've returned. Feeling overwhelmed by the atmosphere, I greeted timidly, "Gina, were you attempting to place me in a facility and throw me out?" Abruptly, my mother-in-law angrily denounced me. Puzzled by the circumstances, my sister-in-law added her 2 cents. "Gina, do you recall what you previously said?" "I want to put Mom in a facility," you stated. "Did you find it too much to manage her?" She went on as though I'd said anything like that. "Since you're a stranger anyhow, it's all right. I'll be taking care of Mom going forward, so you won't need to come here." This was stated to me by my sister-in-law in a purposefully stern manner. My mother-in-law likewise expressed her rage by glaring fiercely at me while yelling, "It's unbelievable to me. You are a bother. Simply depart without delay. Recognized?" "I'm going to go." I fought back with little strength, so I wiped away my tears and began packed my things. I grabbed only the necessities and left the things that held memories of James behind. I remarked at the door, "Thank you for everything," to which my sister-in-law, anxious to get me out of there, said, "You're still here? Get out of there fast." I was deeply troubled by a mixture of frustration and despair in my heart. I was forced out of the house and without warning went back to my parents' place. "Gina, what happened? Why is the luggage there?" My mother's amazement at my unexpected homecoming was evident. I apologize for the abruptness, but I don't want to talk about it right now. Please leave me alone for a little since I'll be heading to work from here. There was nothing in the room I used to have at my parents' house. I put the bags down, stretched down on the ground, and let my mind wander while staring up at the ceiling. What was going to happen to my sister-in-law's own family? Although my mother-in-law had hinted that Robert would someday move in with her, I never got the impression that my sister-in-law had similar plans. I tried not to worry about it anymore, but thinking about my mother-in-law made it impossible for me to remain silent. Then something clicked in my memory. James attempted to tell me something the day before he passed away and was ready to give me an envelope, but his mother called him away, so I never heard about the envelope. What may be included within? Is that something like a will? I was concerned. I cautiously opened the envelope and looked over its contents. Yes, it was. I was shocked to see what was inside the package. I went to work from my parents' house the following day, told the principal about my training, went back to my responsibilities, and closed the day as if nothing had happened. Please excuse me while I head out. You must be exhausted from the training, my colleague observed to me as I was about to depart. Your husband's death must have been difficult for you. Avoid going overboard. But my haste to return home had nothing to do with exhaustion or the sadness of James's passing. I had to get in touch with Robert to inquire about my sister-in-law's circumstances. I was scared to use my personal phone in public where anybody may listen, in case it turned into a serious talk. I wanted to speak with Robert face to face, so as I was driving home, I wrote him an email. I also have a few things to say about my wife. Robert answered right away. I phoned Robert and locked myself in my room when I came home. Robert answered my phone right away, as if he had been waiting for it. Gina, I'm happy for you. I was about to give you a call. Robert spoke first in a tone of relief. I explained to him that Mary was making up stories after telling him about her stay at her mother's place. I informed him that I had been thrown out of the house when it was said that I had tried to take over the house by sending my mother-in-law to a nursing facility based on her falsehoods. Really? Right now, where are you? Startled, Robert inquired. I responded by saying that I was at my parents' place at the time and went into detail about everything that had transpired after the funeral. I really apologize for it. He offered a heartfelt apology. Robert, you don't have to say sorry. I answered. Since her son Alex started college, my sister-in-law's tendency to abruptly leave the house and spend lavishly appears to have gotten worse. Mary was getting money from her mother, is that right? And what became of the money? He inquired. I assumed Robert was aware that my mother-in-law had been providing my sister-in-law with a substantial sum of money. Regarding it, I have not heard anything. Alex's tuition has been covered by me, and our family has never had a lot of money. Robert answered, seeming taken aback. Well, let me make a request. Would you be able to visit my folks on Sunday? I made a suggestion. Though I was a little conceited to ask for something like this, I went ahead and tried it. Their home was en route to my mother-in-law's residence, around 30 minutes drive from my parents' home. I was going to pick Robert up and we were going to my mother-in-law's place. Recognized. I'll rely on navigation because I know the general location. I will get back to you when I get close. After accepting my idea, Robert hung up the phone. I got a call shortly after that from my mother-in-law's residence. What may that be? Only one day following the earlier incidents? I picked up the phone after having that thought. Hello, you. Did you use money without authorization? Return it right away. I got a yell from my sister-in-law. By taking money without permission, what do you mean? Confused, I asked. I couldn't grasp what my sister-in-law was talking about and felt absolutely misunderstood. When I checked Mom's bank account, the balance was too low. What did you use it for? My sister-in-law pressed, but I had certainly not done such a thing. It's true that I forgot to deposit the planned $2,000 to being preoccupied with my mother-in-law's illness and caregiving procedures, but I never withdrew money from the savings without permission. Is there some misunderstanding? I have made deposits into her account, but I've never looked inside the passbook. I firmly replied. My sister-in-law seemed unsatisfied with my answer and raised her voice. Come over on Sunday. Let's clarify this matter. This was convenient for me, so I replied, understood. Let's discuss it in front of her, and ended the call. On the planned Sunday, Robert arrived at my parents' house earlier than expected. Oh, you are? My mother said, surprised at Robert's sudden appearance. Yes, He's the husband of my late husband's sister. Mom, you've met him before, haven't you? Husband's sister. Mom, you've met him before, haven't you? I explained. My mother couldn't immediately recall who he was, but eventually remembered. Ah, yes, I've seen him before. Seeing my mother's realization and joy, I explained. Actually, I wanted to consult him about my husband's family matters. After leading Robert to the living room and briefly exchanging greetings, I took out an envelope. I want you to see this. The envelope contains several photos and a report. As I spread the photos and the report in front of Robert, he exclaimed in surprise, "What this is?" The photos showed my sister-in-law with a young man, enjoying herself at a nightclub and heading to a hotel. The report, from a detective agency, detailed evidences of my sister-in-law's expenses. James entrusted this to me before he passed away, and since he died before we could discuss it, I only recently looked at it. I explained the situation to Robert. James had suspected his sister of reckless spending and had secretly commissioned an investigation. He intended to discuss the results with me, but passed away before he could. Robert trembled with anger at the photos. I thought she was frequently leaving the house, but to think she was doing this. With a sigh full of indignation, Robert said, "Gina, can you come with me right now? This situation can't be ignored." I had intended to do so from the start and nodded immediately. 30 minutes later, we arrived at my mother-in-law's house and rang the doorbell. "It's Gina. I've come as promised," I said, and soon heard my sister-in-law's annoyed voice. "How long do you plan to make me wait?" The sound of unlocking the door came, and the door opened. "Come in." My sister-in-law greeted us, but upon seeing Robert, she tried to close the door. Robert quickly grabbed the doorknob. "Mary, we need to talk. Can you listen for a moment?" he said, holding the door. His voice was calm, but his anger was palpable. My sister-in-law struggled to close the door but couldn't overpower the man's strength and eventually had to leave it open. "Fine. What do you want?" she said that while allowing us to stay at the entrance, seemingly not wanting my mother-in-law to be aware of Robert's unexpected visit. "Is that you in these pictures? Who's the man next to you?" Robert asked, confronting his wife with the photos. "Where did you get these?" "No way." Mary was shocked upon seeing the photos. "Do you remember?" "Well, who is this?" "Answer me." Robert, usually mild-mannered, pressed his wife. "Just a friend. Can't I have young friends?" My sister-in-law retorted defiantly. "A friend? Don't tell lies. I know everything." Robert yelled at her. "Why? Who told you?" Realizing my sister-in-law could no longer continue her lies, she looked defeated. "Your late brother James was concerned about your spending and had it investigated." Robert calmly revealed the truth. "You demanded money from your mother and squandered it all on a nightclub. I'm aware of the entire situation," Robert continued, trying to contain his anger. "It's hard enough to pay for Alex's tuition, and you exhaust our living expenses and still dare to ask for more money? What a comfortable life, huh?" he continued, his voice filled with rage. His anger did not subside. "That's enough. I don't care if you leave us. We're getting a divorce," he coldly declared to her. What?" My sister-in-law muttered in shock. "Didn't you hear me? We're getting a divorce. I'll send the divorce papers later, fill them out, and send them back," Robert stated bluntly. At those words, my sister-in-law collapsed onto a seat. Later, my sister-in-law and Robert proceeded with the divorce through a lawyer and ultimately finalized it. They agreed to consider her spending at the nightclubs as a reason for compensation and to share the payment of Alex's tuition until his university graduation. However, there was a possibility that she might default on the payments, so they agreed that a lawyer would collect the payments monthly. After receiving her share of my father-in-law's inheritance, my sister-in-law had squandered it all on her expenses at the nightclub and then set her sights on my mother-in-law's property. But she found the bank account balance to be lower than expected, and her plan failed. In fact, It seemed that the money James and I had been giving my mother-in-law was used for living expenses and given to my sister-in-law as she demanded, leaving almost no savings behind. My in-laws' house belonged to my mother-in-law, and there was probably no more money left to give to my sister-in-law unless the house was sold. I learned from the caregiver that my sister-in-law, realizing her failure, had abandoned my mother-in-law and left. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law continued to live a modest life alone with the help of the caregiver.